Police have been called to a hit and run on Brighton seafront.
A vehicle had potentially been used as a weapon. We needed to identify exactly who was driving that vehicle.
A man has been killed.
We just tried to understand why.
Could it have been a terror attack? Could it have been a drunk driver? Could it have been anything else?
The crime scene holds the secrets to the story.
We found a trail of blood.
There must have been a precursor to this incident happening. It's of paramount importance to locate this vehicle.
The forensics must find the clues.
We need to find out who was driving that vehicle at the time.
To catch the killer. It's 5:30 a.m. on Brighton seafront. Sussex police receive a distressing call. 3 males are seriously injured. They've all been victims of a hit and run.
Police and ambulance attended. Preservation of life is first and foremost. It was quite obvious that all their injuries were going to be life-changing to some degree. One of them was significantly more ill than the other 2, and all 3 of them were taken to hospital.
Senior Investigating Officer Chris Friday is assigned to the case. It is vital his team quickly secure the crime scene to preserve any forensic evidence.
The scene itself was over maybe half a mile on a busy main road that runs along the main seafront. Going into that road, you have many other side roads effectively, and of course you've got people that walk along the seafront, you've got cars that are coming into it from various side roads, you've got hotels, you've got pubs. In order to maintain the forensic integrity of that, we have to close it all down. We tape it all off and we do not let anyone in there. And that is purely because we want to preserve it as well as we can until the scenes of crime people go in there.
Sarah Thurkell is one of the UK's leading forensic instructors and has trained more than 400 crime scene investigators.
This is classified as a hit and run incident, which is one of the hardest crime scenes to examine. Not only do you have to take into account location where 3 people have been found, but also the distance that the vehicles travelled, the lead up to the bodies, and also the drive away from the bodies. Is there any blood pattern? Is there any debris? Is there any discarded clothing? Which might be able to identify where the victims may have been when they were hit. It's really important to not just look at the point of impact where the bodies have been hit, but also the road furniture. Has the vehicle mounted the curb? Are there skid marks on the curb? Has the vehicle clipped a road bollard, which has caused the vehicle to spin, which is why it's hit the pedestrians? All these different hypotheses are thought about when you examine such a large crime scene.
Officers have tracked down the families of the 3 male victims, who remain in a critical condition.
I was at work when I saw these 2 policemen come, and they asked they need to talk with the Graciette. And I was like, when they say my name, I say like, oh, it's about my son, it's about my son, it's about my son, straight away. They say to me, we need to go like somewhere quiet to talk. And when they say, yeah, it's about your son, he had an accident. But I was thinking just, my son had an accident, he broke 1 leg, he broke a arm, but it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. Yeah.
2 of the men's conditions are gradually becoming more stable. But 20-year-old Swell Delgado remains in a critical state.
She was screaming. She said, "Swell, Swell." And then someone else took the phone, and he was a police officer, and he said, "Swell has been in an accident and we need to take your sister down to Brighton."
After they just took me to the hospital, I remember I was telling them, "Why are you guys going so fast?" And they was telling me, "Because you need to see your son. We want you to see your son alive."
The victims' families rush to the hospital. As the sun rises at the crime scene, more resources are called in.
The amount of work that goes into an investigation like this is huge. We'll have search teams, we'll have forensic teams, we'll have interview teams, people taking statements from all the witnesses, of which there were many, people staying in hotels. What was the registration number of the car? Who has seen that? Who's insured to drive it? Is there any intelligence on it? Is it a stolen car? Also, where's the vehicle now and who was driving that vehicle? You've also got CCTV, so that is almost another witness. What cameras have we got? Who owns those cameras? Are they private? Are they public? Identifying them so we can look at the footage and then piece together all those parts to help us understand exactly what's happened there.
If there's a high impact crash, especially with a human being, there may well be extensive damage to the front, to the windscreen of the car. There may well be broken headlights, indicators that has fallen off the car at the point of impact. If any of this debris is left at the crime scene, the role of a CSI is to recover the exhibits and photograph them, and then they're sent to an expert to identify the exact make and model of the vehicle that's come from.
That whole scene and all the items that were discarded within that area, scenes of crime to go through, then we need to find out what we need to forensically examine.
On this instance, there was some blood spatter away from where the hit and run occurred that was found further up the road, which appeared to potentially be from maybe some kind of assault scene. The blood spatter would be marked up, photographed again, and then swabbed, just in case it's linked to the hit and run.
The CSIs continue to harvest the extensive crime scene. A mile across town, the victims' loved ones have arrived at Brighton Hospital, and Swell's condition has worsened.
As soon as I came out of the lift, the nurse looked at me and he said, "Are you Swell's auntie?" And I said, "Yeah." So then he took me into this room. They told me there's 1% chance of survival.
And I believe on that 1%, like, something is gonna happen, like miracle.
I remember just walking through the corridor. The first person I saw was Gra, and she just cuddled me. Obviously, I'm crying, she's crying. I'm like, it'll be okay, still not knowing what I'm about to walk into. And I remember just getting outside the room, walking in, I saw him, and I just dropped to the floor. I was like, my best friend. And I remember just holding his hand, and I was just kissing his head. So, love you, like. And still then I was still thinking, we're going to go home tonight and we're going to get a call and say, there's been a big turnaround and he's awake.
And they do the last test. I was praying for him to react, but he didn't. It was the worst thing. There's nothing they can do to help my boy.
Yes.
They try everything, but it was too late. And they asked me, I need to turn off the machine.
20-year-old Swell Delgado is pronounced dead at the hospital. The other two victims are still in a critical condition. DCI Friday and his team are now searching for a killer.
The witnesses describe a large SUV type vehicle, and they describe it accelerating very, very harshly and then swerving quite violently over to one side, colliding with the people, and then it headed off west out towards Hove. So that said to me that there was an element of intent there. It's crucial that we identify who that driver is. You know, we're possibly looking at a murder investigation.
In Sussex, 20-year-old Swell Delgado has been pronounced dead, and two others are left with life-changing injuries after a hit-and-run attack on Brighton seafront.
We have a vehicle that potentially has been used as a weapon. We need to identify exactly what that vehicle is and where is it now and who was driving that vehicle.
We just tried to understand why.
Yeah.
Why? Because we didn't know why, how it happened, why.
Could it have been a terror attack? Could it have been a mistake? Could it have been a drunk driver? Could it have been anything else?
We need to understand the motive behind what's happened. but also we focus on not only the victims, but obviously their friends, their family. Mum lived at home with Saul and Saul's siblings, and you know, it is a very sad time to come into somebody's life at a time when they are experiencing the most horrific thing that can probably happen to any parent. But it's important for us to do that because we need to understand who was Saul.
Oh, my son. He's a cheeky boy, lovely boy, smiling every time.
Yeah.
Happy boy, mommy's boy. He's a man of the house.
Yeah.
Every time take care of me and his brothers. Yeah, Swell was really loved with his brothers. Yeah, he did everything for them. When I'm at work, because he's the one who took the kids to the nursery, and he dressed them, they took them in the morning, make food for them, and he cleaned the house too.
We're friends. We was like soulmates. Everyone just loved him. You couldn't be around Swell without smiling and laughing. Like, he just was bigger than life. Like, and he's just such an amazing person, like inside and out. He just cared for everybody and had such a big heart. That's just how he was as a person. I've never met anyone like him, and I don't think I ever will. He was honestly like one of a kind. Even now, he'll always be my best friend.
Police speak to Swell's friends and family to find out what his plans were that evening.
Swell, he wasn't to go out a lot, like nighttime.
It was one of his friends' birthday. They all went down to Brighton to celebrate all together. It was a big group of them.
I remember the day he came to me. It was around 9 o'clock. He came to my room to ask me how he looked like, and he was so beautiful, like always. And after he just gone. And I didn't see him anymore.
If the driver intended to swerve into the group, then the police will be searching for a murderer. CSIs have recovered blood samples, clothing and debris, but still need to ascertain why this has happened.
Instances like this just don't happen out of the blue. There must have been a precursor to this incident happening, and it's down to the police investigation to try and find out what that was.
In Brighton, they've got a very, very good network of CCTV cameras. We know what time the collision took place, and then we look to backtrack to find out what people were doing on the lead up to this collision. The group left the nightclub and for whatever reason started having an argument with two people.
What we heard was the boys were defending a girl, so that's where the fight kicked off.
And there were people from the victim group kind of trying to stop this from happening. And this argument has continued all the way beyond the pier roundabout and up to Madeira Drive. When it got to the point of a parked vehicle, the pushing and shoving appears to escalate a little bit. After that scuffle, it was done, it was dusted. The two people had walked away. One of them was holding their chin, and our victim group had walked in completely opposite direction. So that was the end of it.
Within 90 seconds, the car has swerved into Swell's group before speeding off.
Three people were now lying in the road. Two of them survived their injuries and one of them died. The main priority is obviously to try and identify who has done this. CCTV evidence becomes key. From CCTV, we managed to trace that vehicle's movement. We could see headlights accelerating towards where the group were crossing, but unfortunately, the cameras were unable to record the actual collision. It was just in a blind spot. We saw the vehicle post-collision and driving away along the seafront, where we lost its trail.
Despite losing the car on CCTV, a camera did manage to capture its number plate.
The registration number of the car, who's insured to drive it, is there any intelligence on it? Is it a stolen car? Who's driving it? Where is it now?
The database check reveals a blue BMW X6. It has not been reported stolen and is registered to an address in South London, 45 miles north of Brighton. Officers make inquiries to speak with the registered keeper.
A large, dark-coloured vehicle that has collided with three pedestrians will have extensive damage on it. Extensive damage on a vehicle is going to be really obvious, and it's really important that this car is located as soon as possible.
That is a really rich source of forensic evidence. We need to be a bit more proactive in locating that car. So we then expand the CCTV parameters. So not only are we now looking at the scene, but we're trying to track the car on that journey.
The CCTV analysts continue to search for the BMW. DCI Friday has called in a collision investigation expert to help ascertain what happened in the blind spot away from the CCTV.
The role of a collision investigator is essentially to reconstruct the collision to establish whether there was any intent. Unfortunately, the impact itself has happened between two of the cameras. And so the outstanding question was, at what point were they actually struck? What position was it in within the carriageway? So in this case, it's working backwards, combining the rest position of the pedestrians, the location of the debris, and obviously the intended path of the vehicle. And from that, we can establish where the vehicle has struck the pedestrians. One of the things that we also identified from the CCTV footage was the presence of an Audi that had travelled along Marine Parade, and as a result of the group being in the carriageway, the driver had brought the car to a stop. Ultimately, that's going to impact on the movements of the driver in the BMW and negotiating its way along Marine Parade. The technology we have nowadays allows us to take a three-dimensional laser scan. It captures the environment as it is, to within a millimetre. We have all of the road markings, all of the parked vehicles. For this particular incident, we have 4 different sources of footage from different premises, 3 of which are on Marine Parade, and 1 of which is located further down the road, looking back from the seafront. The next thing we're looking to do is then plot the position of that BMW as it moves along the road. What we're looking to do is correlate what we see in the footage to a known fixed point in the carriageway. So that could be bollards, it could be street lights, it could be signposts. That's our first position of the vehicle from the CCTV. We then plot the next position, so that's shown by the blue vehicle. Having established those 2 positions, we can measure the distance that it's travelled between those 2 points. Over the time that it takes to travel that distance, we know the speed. We can then repeat that process with further reference points. So what we're doing is we're building up a picture of the speed and movements of the vehicle as it travels along the road. But we have this gap in the middle, and that's obviously where there is no CCTV coverage. So we have to extrapolate the path of the vehicle. So we know its position before it goes out of view, and we know its position once it comes back into view. So based on what we know about how vehicles handle, what their capabilities are, we're able to plot interim positions as it moves across the road. So essentially we can add the additional positions to build ourselves a full picture of its exact movements. And obviously that assists the investigation in terms of whether or not there was any intent and how the driver has manoeuvred down the road.
Dean reviews all CCTV to calculate the vehicle's speed and line of travel. At the crime scene, the CSIs have made a significant discovery that may provide motive for the attack.
We found the trail of blood, just drops every now and again, that went to the area where the BMW was initially parked. That was important because we could show that the person that was bleeding after the fight then got into the driver's seat of that car and therefore responsible for the injuries that then were sustained.
Swabs would be sent off to see if a DNA profile could be obtained from them. DNA evidence could take a minimum of 36 hours to get a profile to identify who that blood belongs to.
The CSIs continue their harvest and discover a baseball cap close to where the BMW was parked. It resembles the cap that one of the suspects was seen wearing on the CCTV.
An item of clothing would have the wearer's DNA on it. If it's a baseball cap, it would be around the sweatband where you'd get really good DNA profile.
The hat is sent off to the forensic lab for further testing.
I believe that they have taken it upon themselves to drive their vehicle at these people that they had had that earlier fight with, and I believe that was the motive behind why 3 people, 1 has now died and 2 have got life-changing injuries.
It seems plausible that the anger and the fury from the fight that happened just moments before continued to fuel them to drive the car into the other party. It appears that they had unfinished business here and deliberately drove the car into the group with speed. By driving at speed on the wrong side of the road shows that there was a real intent to cause serious harm to the others.
The police turned to Dean's CCTV analysis to see if this corresponds with their theory that this was no accident.
From the first CCTV camera, we've got the vehicle up and it's just starting to move across the centre of the carriageway. See, the impact itself has occurred between the first two camera views, so somewhere in this area where these yellow positions are plotted. And so obviously during the impact, the pedestrians have been essentially lifted onto the bonnet, striking the windscreen, have then remained on the bonnet of the vehicle as it continues to accelerate until this point here where the vehicle starts to steer back towards its correct side of the road, at which point the pedestrians then separate from the vehicle, land on the road surface and obviously come to rest in their respective positions. We've got one here next to the lamppost, we've got one here just in front of the parked Ford Focus, and then we've got one slightly further along in the carriageway itself. In a case like this, intent is obviously the thing that's trying to be proved. In a simple case where there wasn't any other vehicle, the fact that the driver of the BMW has steered into the incorrect side of the road and then struck the pedestrians and steered back, that would be very clear cut. But the presence of the Audi is a complicating factor. So in order for the driver to proceed along Marine Parade, they would have to drive around the Audi. Clearly, the presence of this Audi, with its brake lights illuminated, is a potential source of evidence that the driver could say impacted their visibility along the road. And so, as part of the case, we needed to do a reconstruction at the scene and build the case from there.
The CCTV analysts have a breakthrough. They have sighted the blue BMW abandoned on a side street.
And the CCTV was able to show it driving along the coast and then turning into Middle Street. When we sent officers to that location, and they found the BMW X6 with extensive damage to the front.
It's really important to get this recovered as soon as possible. There may be vital forensic evidence to be able to charge somebody with an offence of death by dangerous driving or murder.
In Brighton, detectives have located the car they suspect was used in a hit-and-run attack, which killed 20-year-old Swell Delgado and severely injured 2 others. Officers are already en route to the registered keeper's address, 45 miles away, in South London.
The vehicle was abandoned approximately half a mile away from this collision site. Forensically, that vehicle becomes a crime scene in its own right. We needed to show that it was that vehicle that was responsible for causing the injuries it did.
A vehicle that's been involved in a traffic collision has potentially a lot of trace evidence on it which needs to be recovered. If a person has hit the windscreen, there may be blood, there may be fibres, there may be hairs. Not only that, if a body's hit the bonnet of the vehicle and this vehicle had extensive damage to the bonnet, there may be paint fragments on the victim, but also there may well be blood all over the bonnet as well. A forensic search of the vehicle may also reveal additional evidence that might identify who the drivers are of the vehicle.
Inside of the vehicle, there are various areas that need to be examined.
It's really important to examine the driver's seat area as a priority in a vehicle. When involved in a fatal traffic accident, we need to find out who was driving that vehicle at the time.
We examined the steering wheel, the handbrake, the gear stick, etc., something that the driver would always touch. We found blood on all those parts in the inside of the car. We also had more blood on the side of the car, which looked like it had dripped and fallen onto the running board. We know from CCTV that the people that got into that vehicle, one of them was bleeding after the fight and then got into the driver's seat of that car. Key evidence to show that he was there, but also that he was a driver of that car and therefore responsible for the injuries that then were sustained.
That blood would be swabbed and sampled in order to try and obtain a DNA profile.
It's crucial that we identify who that driver is.
The samples are rushed off to the lab for DNA profiling.
I was like, oh, at least they find the car, they find the car, because if they find the car needs to be registered, so.
But then they explain it's not just about being registered, like we need to know like who was driving and who did what they did.
They don't want to talk much, till they have more.
Yeah, it was a good thing they had the car, and they could then find out from there who were the people responsible for this.
In terms of the investigation, we start again. That's another scene. CCTV, witnesses, etc. Exactly as we would do with the first scene, we do it at that deposition site of the vehicle. When we looked at CCTV as to when that car got there, it showed it coming along Middle Street, it showed two people getting out as if to look at the damage, and it then showed them walking around the corner. The key was to identify who those people were. When we've then looked at CCTV to try and find out where they'd walked from the vehicle, we were able to place them at a street corner waiting for a taxi. And that then opens up another line of inquiry around who booked that cab. Where did they now go? Have we now got another scene, their home address?
Police establish that the taxi was ordered through the Uber app and make inquiries to determine whose account it was booked through and where it was headed. Meanwhile, the forensic lab have an update from the blood swabs taken from the pavement and interior of the car.
The DNA profile came back to a chap by the name of Iftikhar Kondeka. We were able to show that it was his blood trail on the pavement and then to the driver's door of the BMW X6. He was a driver of that car and therefore responsible for the injuries that then were sustained. He lived in South London, and that linked into where the Uber taxi had taken him from where the BMW was abandoned back home. We know that Iftikhar had a brother called Irfan, and the mixed profile on the DNA on the baseball cap was shown to come back to Irfan and Iftikhar. We were able to show that both Irfan and Iftikhar were the two people involved in the argument along the seafront. From DNA swabs that were taken from the front of the vehicle and from samples taken from the windscreen, we were able to link our victim group to that vehicle, so we could categorically say it was that vehicle that was responsible for causing those injuries. We learnt that that same Uber account had been used the following day to book another cab to a local hospital, and we were able to obtain CCTV of the car arriving at the hospital, a person getting out of it with a clear injury to their chin, going into hospital and receiving treatment for that. And we were able to get from the hospital really clear images of Iftikhar Kondeka.
Further checks reveal that Iftikhar was on licence, having recently been released from prison for grievous bodily harm, and that he had an appointment with the probation service.
We identified that he was due to attend a pre-arranged appointment the following day. With that knowledge, we were able to attend that appointment as well, and he was arrested on suspicion of murder. Irfan was a little bit more elusive, and we attended the home address on many occasions. He knew we wanted to arrest him, and he knew that the net was closing in, but he opted to hand himself in a few days later.
Police forces have set protocols when an offender is arrested and taken into custody. Hand swabs will be taken, nail scrapings will be taken, head hair will be taken, blood and urine samples. They will take photographs of any injuries that the suspect's got.
In addition, we would look to seize property from them, particularly digital devices. We would also look to conduct searches of their home addresses because we may want to recover the clothing they were wearing at the time.
Each of those items of clothing would be bagged up separately and labelled and preserved for a forensic scientist to potentially look at.
Specially trained officers begin to question the brothers about their involvement in the altercation on the street and the hit and run.
The brothers were very laid back. This is almost like another day at the office to them. They didn't appear to have any real respect for anyone.
The main suspect has prior convictions, inflicting grievous bodily harm, again outside a nightclub. This demonstrates a distinct lack of fear or disregard for the consequences of his serious actions. Since the brothers had knowledge of the criminal justice system, once in police custody, are undeterred by the prospect of prison.
The detectives present their compelling forensic evidence to both suspects.
Eventually, they accepted that Iftikhar was the driver and Irfan was the front seat passenger. They pleaded to manslaughter. Their main defence was that this was a collision. They couldn't see the people crossing the road. They didn't do it on purpose, and this was nothing more than an accident.
When he stands there, he doesn't know if he saw them or not. It was lies. He tried to say that the other car that was in front, he thought was with the boys because he was scared for his life. It was lies, lies after lies after lies.
We were adamant that this wasn't just an unfortunate incident, this was a crime of intent. We didn't accept the plea of manslaughter. So both brothers were charged. Iftikhar, the driver, was charged with murder. His brother, Irfan, he was charged with assisting an offender. So we proceeded to trial with murder. Murder is the most serious of offences. It carries life imprisonment. It's probably fair to say that if someone is charged with murder, they will try everything to aid their defence to get off that charge. As an investigation team, we need to anticipate what potential defences they're going to come up with and try and plug those gaps as well, in order that the case we present to CPS is watertight.
With both brothers remanded in custody, DCI Friday requests a detailed reconstruction of the collision in order to refute the claims that this was an accident and secure a murder conviction against Iftikhar.
The reconstruction is a big undertaking, but it is 100% worth it. It all occurs over a space of 2 to 3 hours, but there's a lot to do and a lot of data to collect in that time frame. It's essential that you see it firsthand. You need to be a motorist, you need to be driving along that road, seeing what it was like under those conditions.
When we came back from the hospital a couple of days after they did the balloon release, it was so many people, all these friends and neighbours, people from school. It was really heartwarming to see everyone.
It's like, wow, I know my son is loved, but I never. It was really good to see.
Yeah.
Everything they did for me and for my family, I'm grateful for that. Really grateful.
It wasn't until maybe a few days after when you start thinking, okay, this has actually happened, and you're starting to question everything because you still can't understand why anyone would do what they had done. When I wanted answers, and they were like, we didn't see them. This was an accident. It wasn't an accident. He didn't drive his car and accidentally hit Suel. It was a murder. He was killed, and it was their intentions to do so. That's what I would say.
The detailed reconstruction is now complete, and the police have an accurate picture of what happened in the camera's blind spots.
What we have here is a photograph taken inside an identical BMW X6. That way, the cast of the headlights is therefore giving a similar impression. You get a good idea from these photographs, as well as the street lighting and the ambient lighting from the surrounding buildings. We also have the Audi, which was also positioned in the same place that it was at the time. The presence of this Audi, with its brake lights illuminated, is a potential source of evidence that the driver could say impacted their visibility along the road. We can see the movements of the pedestrians seconds prior to impact, and we know the direction that they were intending to travel. But at the moment that they crossed the road and at the moment of impact, they weren't in view. And so from that perspective, we have to then estimate the path that they followed and the speed at which they were travelling. Obviously, that leads us to a number of possibilities as to where they were positioned. And so during the reconstruction, we consider those possibilities. We cover all the different scenarios to make sure that we're assessing the visibility fairly. We knew the path that the vehicle was following, and so therefore we're able to replicate that as close as we could to the actual collision circumstances. I think they were clearly visible.
The collision expert report was able to show that this was not just a simple car crash. This was a crime of intent, and that became the crux of the trial.
A trial date has been set for Iftikhar Kundekar for the murder of 20-year-old Swell Delgado and the attempted murders of 2 others. His brother Irfan is also standing trial for assisting an offender. CCTV, DNA and blood spatter have forensically linked the brothers to the murder weapon, a BMW X6. At Hove Crown Court, Swell's family come face to face with the brothers.
They were sitting in front of us, but they never looked back. They never looked at us. We were sitting right behind them. They never looked.
He didn't show any respect.
He had no respect.
The court case was really hard for me, to be honest, and my sister as well. And she was always there with me, and it was quite hard. We didn't went one day. It wasn't the day they're gonna talk about my son's body.
Yeah.
And I don't want to watch that.
Iftikhar Kundekar claims he had not seen the men and that this was an accident. So the prosecution must rely on the collision investigators' evidence to prove that this was a crime of intent to secure a murder conviction.
From a CSI perspective, we can put somebody in a vehicle, either by DNA or fingerprints or trace evidence. What as CSIs we can't do is put that vehicle travelling down the road at a particular speed. That is the role of the forensic collision investigation officer, to determine the speed of the vehicle, the speed at the point of impact of the vehicle, the direction the vehicle was travelling in.
Our role as an expert witness is to take all of that scene evidence, CCTV and witness evidence, build the picture and essentially tell them how this case has happened and what's caused it. Simply saying what a driver could see is one thing, but being able to show an image or a video from the driving seat with essentially an exact replica of that collision, I think really that's key evidence for the jury. The BMW is a very big vehicle. It weighs slightly over 2 tons, so it's bigger than most cars on the road. And obviously, should it be involved in an impact, the consequences will tend to be very significant. It's a high-performance vehicle. It's capable of accelerating rapidly. But in this particular collision, we are talking about a very short distance from where the vehicle has emerged from the parking space to the point at which the impact has occurred. Here, we can calculate that the vehicle is accelerating as it moves off. It moves onto the incorrect side of the road and then strikes the pedestrians. Now, because the vehicle is under acceleration, those pedestrians will remain on the bonnet and the windscreen for a period of time. And they do so. The steering back to its correct lane is the main reason why those pedestrians have separated from the vehicle. Now, for the vehicle to be able to accelerate from essentially a stationary position to a speed or in excess of 40 miles per hour, that requires harsh acceleration. It's calculated that that vehicle was accelerating at nearly 80% of its maximum capacity, which is essentially full acceleration.
For me, that was really, really damning evidence of the speed it was going, the acceleration that it had, and the route it took. So when you combine that with the earlier fight and what's in his head, this guy's annoyed, the red mist has come down, and now he's using that massive car as a weapon. So from a prosecution point of view, that's really, really powerful evidence to show that he has intended to run these people over and kill them rather than swerving to avoid a parked car.
It's just disgusting. There's no other way to say it.
And he was driving the wrong way of the road.
Yeah. At some points I thought, why if the jury believe him? Why if they believe him?
The court hears that Iftikhar Kundekar has numerous previous convictions, and the details of the GBH offence that Iftikhar had served time for in jail emerge.
He'd recently been released from prison after being sentenced for 7 years for a GBH. The circumstances of that crime were that he drove at a crowd of people using a car.
To find out that this is the second time he's done it. Second time. He just thought he could just get away with it again.
They had literally been out of prison, and that's why they was out in Brighton celebrating. So if you were celebrating, you know, being a free man, why would you go in there and do something exactly the same to what you've previously done to someone else?
The brothers have a history of violent offending, and it may be that they experience a buzz from escalating to more serious violence as time goes on. In cases like this, where they cannot be stopped by official warnings or by the prospect of prison, it provides evidence that punishment doesn't always work and that we need alternative ways of dealing with offenders that are undeterred by the criminal justice system.
After 16 hours of deliberation, the jury return with their verdicts.
Waiting for that verdict, waiting on 12 people that do not know the job as well as you do to come up with what you think is the right verdict is nerve-wracking. And no matter how many times you do it, it's still nerve-wracking. There's always that element of doubt in the back of your head, always.
The jury find Iftikhar Kundekar guilty of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He is jailed for life with a minimum term of 26 years. His brother Irfan is found guilty of assisting an offender and is jailed for 3 years.
When I heard the judge say 26 years without parole, it doesn't make it better, but I feel in our situation it was the best outcome we could have got.
I'm so glad that he got the judge that he got, and she could see right through him, and I've got respect for her for that. She could see right through him.
He will not be coming out of prison for a very long time, and he will not be able to do this to anyone else.
It's quite a disturbing case, but it's a prime example of different organisations working together with one goal: to prove that this car deliberately ran into these 3 individuals with the intent to kill.
Everyone's lives has been changed. All our lives, you know, not just us, but everyone else who was there. So many families like destroyed just because of one person's action.
It's just a big part of my life that was taken, and it wasn't just my best friend, he was my brother, and it's like a friendship that, yeah, just can never be replaced, never.
I just don't understand why life be so unfair. No moms deserve that pain. And some days it's so hard. Some days it's really hard. I miss him.